Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jacob Shell,
I'm the show.
and this is The Shell Show. So, welcome back, everybody, to another episode with my good friend, Eric Boyd.
What's the name?
This is The Shell Show.
The Shell Show. Thank you.
So, originally we were To Be Determined.
That's right.
Then
that
upon
was the one that I saw.
Upon further review, there were lots of podcasts and episodes called To Be Determined. So, it wasn't original enough.
Right.
Shell Show is not original. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't find something on YouTube from 8 years ago called The Shell Show, because I did. I'm not sure how much this messes with that. I don't make money to do this.
When I was in high school, shell was like a term like, man, that's shell. Like, that's whack.
Oh, okay.
So.
That's not good.
Yeah. So, I don't know if
The
you
Whack
care,
Show.
But, man, that's shell.
Take them all back, everybody.
No,
Is that a throwback?
Yeah. Shell
So
Show's
we've
good.
experimented
I like
with
Shell Show.
lots of names. My sister said, I don't remember what she said. It was like "Shell me something" or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Lots of names. I thought about the Jacob Shell Show.
Yeah.
Because nobody could ever come at me for that. It's my name. You know what I'm saying?
It shall be determined.
Shall be determined. Shall be determined at a later date. Yeah, so I wrestled with it. The reason that we said it so much, we recorded all those episodes.
Yeah.
And then that night, at the end, I was like, you know what? I'm going to record an intro. Let's just come up with a name and make it work. And looking around, it didn't seem like it was really being used by anybody anymore. So I'm not making any money to do this, which is kind of gives me the ability to be whatever we want to be.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not going to turn down sponsors if they decide to present themselves. So I want to be positioned for that.
Yeah.
We were talking to David earlier, and he was saying they just secured a big-time sponsor for their podcast.
Cool.
And I said, well, you need to help me do that.
Well, if that day comes, you just let them name it whatever they want to name it.
Hey, that's what – so episode 1, Trey and I discussed this.
Yeah.
Trey had a Bass Pro Shop hat on. And I said, Bass Pro, where you at?
Right.
You should sponsor us. We're good old country boys. We shop at the Bass Pro. So sponsor it. We also offered it for sale, $1 million, and you can name it whatever you want. We'll talk about whatever you want. Felt like that was a fair price.
Well, I mean,
you've been on
got
here,
room too. You'll negotiate. I mean, there's room to come.
Now
come down
that you have been on this podcast, the value has just skyrocketed.
We'll see what happens.
So, well, anyways, we discussed earlier kind of the business you were in, doing cabinets, professional installation and sales of kitchen cabinets specifically. Yep. And, we hit on the faith aspect of business and how that's always been, maybe not always, but in your professional life, at least as an adult, it's become a very core thing that you hang on to throughout your business. Now, having left the major manufacturers to become independent of them, but still working hand in hand with them, how do you still loop in biblical practices to business? Because it's very much a topic that people will separate.
Yeah.
People separate church and state. People
Sure.
separate church and school. People separate church and work. And that's how it would probably impact you the most.
Yeah. So for my working career, I guess, or my time that I've been working, I've always heard the terms, well, it's just business, right? And usually that's when you're doing something to somebody that's hurtful.
Yeah.
And it's
like
not
the
personal,
person, it's just business.
You don't want them to take the thing that you're doing personally, even though that it's personal.
Yeah.
Right. And so, or it's somebody being not quite honest with their money in some way, whether it's, trying to avoid paying taxes or,
it's just business.
Which, listen, I'm all for minimizing how much money I give the government to,
throw away.
I feel like I'm a better steward of money than the government is.
Absolutely.
Right?
I would agree with you.
But at the same time, I live in this country, and so I feel like we're supposed to give unto Caesar, right?
Right.
And so I think Jesus made that pretty clear.
Yeah.
That we're not supposed to like work the system or avoid doing what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. In a dishonest way.
In a dishonest way.
Yeah.
You work within what's legal and what's ethical,
Right.
and so forth. And so I feel like whether you're in playing a sport or you're in business, you always just try to figure out how close you can get to cheating without getting busted.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know. I mean, I feel like that is, that's what it's just business kind of means, right? Like you're either treating somebody poorly,
Yeah.
or you're trying to get away with something.
Right.
And so I think that, the more that I've been thinking about how I do business, I've been really convicted over the last few years about some of the things. Although, I've always been a pretty, try to be, have a moral compass, right, that directs me and make good decisions and so forth. It's easy to make excuses and justify something, right?
Absolutely.
As, well, it's this or it's that. And so for a lot of years, I did a lot of like side work for cash. And I don't have a problem with somebody doing that, right? But at the same time, it's like if you want to put God in control of your business and bless it, like you can't leave any room for anything to be a gray area.
Right.
Like I think if you're going to really trust him, that you can trust him with everything.
Absolutely.
Right? And make sure that you do things that are the correct way and that are honest and ethical and so forth. And so I think that's a shift. I've seen a lot of people that claim to be, Christian businesses or Christian business people, and they act one way when they're around you outside of work, maybe in like friendships or, at church or something like that. But when they're at work, they act a different way. And it feels like that you can live two different lives. And it's very, I just don't see it like that. I used to think that it's okay because it's just business.
Yeah.
And the more that I understand what Jesus did when he came, he showed us exactly what he wanted us to do as far as living, like what his kingdom was about.
Yeah.
His kingdom was about doing everything different than the way it was and different than what culture says or the world says.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so forth. And so if we're going to be Christian business people and if we're going to follow Jesus and we're going to have, be light and salt and things like that to the world in our work, then we've got to make sure that we're paying attention to the way that he showed us how to do it.
Yeah.
And so, I've spent a lot of time. One of I don't know if you have a life verse, but like I don't know if it's even a thing. But there's a verse that has always spoke to me, and it always comes around, and it almost like it applies to everything that I do. And it's Matthew 11:28. Jesus said, "Come on to me, like all that are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest.
Yeah.
Take on my yoke. It's easy and it's light." And man, that is like the most beautiful invitation.
Yes.
Right? And so what he's saying is, my kingdom is not like the world, right?
Right.
I do things differently.
Yeah.
But if you're worn out from doing things the way the world does it, it's a perfect time to come to me and let me teach you the way that is easy.
Yeah.
Right? And so I found a really cool my mentor in life, he gave me a book years ago, and it was a really practical little book about like having conversations with Jesus. And there's this one page, and it was one of the best little devotions I saw, but it talked about how, and Jesus was a carpenter, right? Like, so he probably made yokes. That was it was agrarian culture, right? There was people had animals, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a yoke is made to basically let two animals work together
Right.
to do more. But generally, you don't, when you have like a young animal that doesn't know how to do the work, you put them with an older animal that
Right.
knows how to do it
Yeah.
and can carry more of a load because the younger one's not ready to carry that load. But a good carpenter can make that yoke so that it doesn't hurt the younger one,
Right.
right? And it doesn't hurt the older one because it's an uneven load.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that's stronger and more knowledgeable can do more work, and the younger one can come alongside and learn from them,
Yeah.
right? And they're still doing the work, but it's easy and the load is light.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful picture of that. And I feel like that is, that is such an
Wow.
important thing to understand as you work. Like if you invite Jesus to take the load, that just makes everything easier, right? And so I love that, and I've always shared it with people, and especially in the work environment, because I think it's so important, right?
Yes, absolutely.
To not just, with Jesus, but with one another as well. Like you can like also, help other people in the same way.
Yeah.
With that kind of idea of like kind of taking the load and teaching somebody. Like my heart is for mentoring, right? I love the idea of being able to take everything that I've learned and pour it into somebody else,
Right.
and help them figure out how to maybe not go through some of the challenges that I've gone through.
Yeah.
Like I've learned some things the hard way, and if I can shorten that learning curve for somebody else, I love it. I love
Yeah,
doing that.
absolutely.
So.
That's incredible. Well, one of the things that I really like to hit on, because it was a major and still is somewhat of a major stumbling block for myself, is personal finance. So, I don't know if you have any good tips for people who maybe not necessarily struggling, but just not, they don't really know where to start to build good fundamentals. We don't teach that in our culture.
Yeah.
So, like, we have a lack, most parents have a lack of knowledge of how to properly handle finances,
Mm-hmm.
and the schools don't convey it either.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be the one that goes out and says it's intentional, but I think it is. Because I think there's a massive industry for credit.
Sure.
There's a massive industry for student loan debt, and it really fuels a lot of things. And honestly, our economy kind of stands on debt for the most part in consumerism. So I really want this podcast to be a place where people can learn. We do a lot of things conversationally that's very relaxed.
Yeah.
And I do that on purpose because I don't ever want people to feel like I'm coming from a position where I think that I know something they don't, because it's not true.
Right.
At this point. So I try to bring guests on who have the life experience and who have some of that knowledge or wisdom that a mentor may have passed, or just things that you've learned through trials and working through it. So what are some personal and practical tips that you would give for people on a financial basis in their personal lives, not from a business aspect, but
Well, one practical thing that I always try to tell people is that if you're thinking about buying something, first of all, I totally agree with most of what Dave Ramsey teaches. I mean, that wasn't around when I was growing up.
Right.
I've kind of heard him on the radio and listened to, and I love how he helps people get out of debt. I love how, like, just I don't know what the right word is, but he's brash. He's kind of like,
he's rough around the edges.
Yeah, but he's he does it in a good way.
He only does that to people, at least what I've seen, because I listen to him all the time.
Yeah, sometimes
I listen to his
need...
podcasts. I watch the show. So it seems to me, at least, when people aren't listening, or when he can tell that that's the kick in the butt that they need, that's when he's a little aggressive.
Right.
He gets a little aggressive.
So here's one that's real practical. I think it's really good. I think it's best to never get in debt. I've taken on some debt at certain times, and it doesn't feel good, and I've hustled to get out of it as quick as I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a small mortgage right now, so I'm not completely debt free, and I'm cool with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I do not like the feeling of owing anybody anything.
Right.
And it is a. I mean, maybe some people feel differently, but for me, it just makes me feel.
Yeah, it does feel weird, especially from a consumer basis.
Yeah.
So, like, there are some instances where I feel comfortable with it in a business sense.
Yeah.
If you're borrowing on something that's making money to pay itself off,
Right.
consult a CPA or someone smarter than me. Don't take my advice.
Yeah.
But that makes me a little more comfortable. Obviously, I'm coming from a younger perspective where I don't have access to all that capital.
Right.
So at that point, you have to exercise more patience,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, not yet.
Right. And so patience is a good word. So the advice that I've given often, and whether it's you're thinking about buying a new car or maybe jumping into a mortgage
Yeah.
or upgrading your house to
Mm-hmm.
something bigger, what I tell people is, okay, you're excited right now.
Yeah,
That excitement's going to wear off
absolutely.
very quickly.
Yes.
So what I'd like for you to do is figure out how much that payment's going to go up and start making that payment to a bank account
Yeah,
for
smart.
for at least 6 months or a year and see what that feels like, see how it changes your lifestyle. Because right now you're like, I can swing that extra $500 a month.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you can swing it, then put it in a savings account for
And
6 months
feel
or a
it a little
year.
bit.
And if you still feel like you can swing it, now you have a down payment for whatever you were going to buy,
Yeah, that's cool.
right?
That's really cool.
But the chances are you're probably going to like having that
Yeah.
cash in your bank account
Yeah.
more than you're going to want to spend it.
Absolutely.
And so, and if you can put off that desire to get that new shiny thing for that period of time, the desire is probably going to pass and you're going to feel the same way that as if you went ahead and bought it.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah.
that would be a practical thing.
So it's kind of funny. That's similar to the way that I ended up getting out of debt the first time.
Yeah.
So we're in debt the third time. This time it was all house. So fortunately, but the first time was student loans, and I'm such a hyper consumer. But before I got out of college, I got hired by Wells Fargo, and I was making really good money. So every time I was online and I got to the checkout on something that I wanted, I looked at the total, and I closed the page, and that exact amount I paid to debt immediately. Because I was like, well, I was willing to let it go, so here it goes.
Yeah.
You know, and that really helped. I'm
Right.
not so good at that anymore. I wish I need to be more like that, and I will start being more like that just to knock it out.
Yeah.
And Lord willing, this should be the last month that we're in debt on anything other than our house, which would be incredible.
Yeah.
But it's just that the consumeristic mindset that has really, or the jump too early, lack of patience, and that's punished us every time.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, that's kind of the society that we live in, right?
Yeah.
It's all around us.
Instant gratification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we think that those things are going to make us happy or bring us some sort of level of satisfaction,
Right.
and so we're bombarded with that idea when it's really not.
Yeah, it's fake.
Yeah.
And they sell it to you, they're not buying it for themselves.
No.
They're just enjoying all the money that you're handing over.
For sure.
So it's a really interesting concept, but I feel like it's really important because I don't know the listener base. I assume 90% of it's family and friends that are listening.
Right.
But in reality, there are even, we'll say, seasoned adults who still have to learn good financial practices. So I always try to bring some insight from
Yeah.
my more experienced guests because I'm 25, so I don't have a long time that I've been seasoned in the financial world,
Right.
but I've definitely done it the wrong way a lot.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I also try to share the advice, whether it's about finances or really anything, it's like, life, you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah,
The key's just not making the same mistakes more than once.
absolutely.
Right? You do need to learn from it.
Right.
And then, don't go back to the same thing again. If you do that,
Driving the same thing.
Eventually you wind up in a pretty good spot.
We can't help you if you don't learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
You need a different podcast.
Right.
So, well, I'm kind of dry on topics.
Well,
You got something?
well,
Anything in your brain that you want to hit on?
I was telling you, we were talking earlier, and I was telling you how I was about Bezalel. You want to talk
Yes.
about Bezalel?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So, little preface. Obviously, we have to dump the SD cards, and so we got into some topics that we wanted to save for the podcast, and then I went and forgot them.
That's all
But
right.
yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about um, morphing that into the spiritual and workplace
Yeah,
all coinciding.
yeah. I mean, it's really kind of more about what we touched on the last podcast about how God is a creative being and
Yeah.
we're created in His image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and and another thing that I was talking about was kind of how like I never had to really look for anything. I always just kind of did what was in front of me and
Yeah.
took the next step. And so I feel like we all kind of have an ability to do work that is
Yeah.
good work that
Right.
is pleasing to God
Yeah.
and fulfilling to us, and
Absolutely.
that is part of our purpose, like
Mm.
in this time
Yeah.
on this earth, is to like carry out some work that God wants to do in and through us.
Yeah.
And so and there's enjoyment in that, there's fulfillment in that. And so I hate the idea of like working for the weekend, right? Like
Yeah.
I hate that idea of like, oh, we're just gonna grind it out so
It's
we can get to
Monday,
the
but
weekend.
Friday's right around
Like
the corner.
the work that you do is work,
Yeah.
but you should enjoy it,
Yeah.
right? It should be something, and if you don't, you're probably not doing the right thing. Like you should probably figure out what it is that you don't like about it and find something that's different,
Yeah.
that doesn't create that feeling like you dread it, right?
I
'Cause
think perspective's big on that too.
yeah,
Because I've been in some situations like Wells Fargo, even, and I got to the point where I was really miserable
yeah,
and having full work days in my sleep, like dreaming
right,
an entire like confrontational work day, and a lot of it I believe was self-imposed. Like I got to this place where I was nervous to push myself to try new things because I was afraid that other people would be upset that I did it wrong.
yeah,
I didn't feel like in some situations the people had the heart of a teacher where they were going to be understanding. I felt like doing it wrong was going to be very confrontational and potentially endanger my job.
yeah,
So I got real comfortable at just doing what I knew how to do and started getting somewhat complacent. And then in that season of not being content with where I was at and not being willing to take steps to become a better business professional, I started having these type of anxiety, not attacks because they weren't debilitating. It just was like it was really stealing my rest and stealing my peace.
yeah,
And I think at some point I really convinced myself that it was the Lord pushing me somewhere else, which I'm not going to say it wasn't.
right.
But I truly believe that my mentality on that whole thing is what really messed it up for me.
Sounds like you were striving to achieve something, and because you weren't there yet, it was stressing you out. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like and so
well, it was fear.
yeah,
It was fear of failure.
fear
I
of
was
failure.
so scared to fail at what I was doing that I didn't even try.
Yeah,
And it just crippled me.
yeah. So I don't really I don't really look at anything as failure that you try,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I feel like if you try something, the outcome is never failing.
Yeah.
You may not do it right, or it may not turn out how you like to,
Mhm.
but you're learning,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
so, if you're afraid to try it, that's where the failure is.
Yeah.
Like you'll miss. Like if you're afraid to try something, that's where I see like
And that's
failure.
where I think that
But if you're
mindset is
willing to
what
give it
got
a
me. Yeah.
shot, and put your best effort into it, whatever the outcome is okay,
Yeah.
right? Because you're gonna grow from it. You're gonna
Absolutely.
learn. Like learning what you don't like is just as important.
Yeah.
It's part of. I
Yeah.
feel really fortunate and blessed that been doing the same thing since I was 16 years old. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do, like and I
Yeah.
didn't go for something. I just did what was right in front of me,
Right.
and I enjoyed it. So I kept doing it,
Yeah.
and then like it changed a little bit, and I went where it changed, and I just and it was a progression
Yeah.
and stuff. But I still love what I do.
That's awesome.
I love I love where it's taken me.
Yeah.
The thing that I've kind of concentrated on. So like that's what I'm saying. You have to find a thing,
Right.
right, that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be it's going to be like, there's going to be a lot of times it's a process of finding out, I don't like this.
Right.
So try something else.
Yeah.
Don't stay miserable.
Yeah. It was unfortunate too because there were so many good people there.
Yeah.
It was a great company culture. The office was great. It was all great, but because I was making myself a prisoner in my own mind.
Right.
I just I'm not going to say I threw it all away because it went well and I was still doing what I needed to do, but it felt like I really missed an opportunity that the Lord was presenting to me.
Well, I don't know all the details, but I'm thinking that what you're doing now is a result of a relationship that came out of that season.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And so
Absolutely.
So again, I think relationships are really, really important,
Yes, they're huge.
So you may be in a place for a certain time, and it's not as much about, the actual thing that you thought you were there for, but the relationships that came out of the time that you spent doing that.
Yeah.
So being intentional about building relationships at all times, whether it's, the person that is, the bank teller,
Yeah.
right? Or the person that's serving you at a restaurant, or the person that, you just happen to be next to in a store or something like that. I mean, you never know how important, like, what you say, or just being, just a smile and being willing to give somebody a little bit of attention, how far that goes. But in even more so, like in a work environment, like the other thing that was always taboo is you don't talk about your personal life at work.
Yeah,
like,
definitely not.
When I was,
definitely not religion or politics
or personal life. Like I worked in a corporate environment where it was like we work. We don't talk about what I do at home. You don't talk about my family. I don't talk about it. And I've been in that culture, and just like,
that's rough.
It's awful. Like, I've never been afraid to open up to somebody and be vulnerable.
Right.
There is such a high reward on the other side of that. Like, out of fear, we kind of like, I don't know if I can put myself out there. That's making myself vulnerable.
Right.
That's a real thing, right? The fear to do that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, you make yourself vulnerable and you get hurt.
Yeah.
But you get over it. But the other side of it, the upside of what can come out of being honest and vulnerable with somebody, it opens up doors for relationships that can be so deep and so meaningful.
Absolutely.
So, that's an important thing too. And again, that separation between business and everything else, I don't see that line anymore. Like, I don't see any need for it. Like, if we're gonna be salt and light to the world, I mean, it's got to be a real thing. It's not something you turn on and off. It's got to be genuine.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, some of the best relationships, best friendships I have, and all, are things that came through work.
Yeah.
Because I truly enjoy getting to know people.
Yeah.
And, caring about their lives, caring about what's going on in their life outside of work. So that's cool. But I said Bezalel, we never
we didn't get into it.
Let's
get into it.
I noticed this guy in the Bible a couple years ago. I mean, I'd read this story, but it jumped out at me a couple years ago. And so Bezalel was an artisan. He was a woodworker, a metal worker. He knew how to build stuff, right? And so he was, God anointed him to build the tabernacle, right? And so he's the first guy in the Bible to be filled with the Spirit of God. He's the first guy to be filled with the Spirit of God to do a work, right? Wow. And his work was to build the temple, which was a picture of God's plan for the earth, right? For heaven on earth, right? It was an exact representation of something God, intended, and it's a picture of the kingdom of God, right? It's a picture of what our future looks like, and so I feel like we are as spirit-filled people, we are, it's our job to create, and to do the work that God has planned in this earth so that his kingdom can be established the way that he wants to do it. And
Yeah.
when you really understand that and that really sinks in, it will change your life because you approach everything so in such a different way with such a different perspective that you don't want to do anything that's not meaningful.
Right.
Right? Like being successful in the eyes of the world means nothing. Right? It's not how much money you made. It's not what kind of status you have or what kind of recognition. You don't care about those things anymore. You just want to know that you're operating in the will of God and that he's pleased with the work that you're doing.
Right.
And that's enough. And the blessings come along with that. I mean, because that's just how he is.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah. So anyway, if you haven't checked out the story of
check it
Bezalel
out. It's worth a read.
Book,
I'm gonna go check it out later. I've read the story of the tabernacle being built before, but never caught that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah. So no, I read through the Bible a couple years ago, and it was like everything that God was showing me had to do with the work, right? The work that we do and how important it is to Him, and and that led me into like kind of creating a business, and setting up in a way where I'm not cutting any corners,
right?
Like everything, this is God's business. So the scripture that He gave me for this business was Psalm 1, right? Psalm 1 through 3, but it says that that you're like a tree planted by a stream of living water that prospers in every season, and and so forth. And so that was the verse that he gave me, and he was basically saying like, I want you to step out in this, and this is set up so that blessing can flow, right? And it's not about you or the business. It's what I'm going to do through the business. It's not just about my own provision, but it's going to provide for other people, ministries, things like that. And so I had this picture of like a tree planted by a stream, and so for me, my happy place is a stream. Like stick me, I could care less about the beach. Stick me next to like a freshwater stream. That's where I want to be. And so it's very meaningful for me. And so anyway, so I the name of my business is Steady Stream Sales, right? Which I'm in the sales business, and you want a steady stream of sales,
absolutely.
Right? You don't want the Dead Sea sales, right? You want a steady stream. So so that's the name that I gave, but it's because of Psalm 1:3, that was the picture he gave me. And it's funny, like there was a time, and I don't know how much time we have, but I'll try to make this short, but there's also a parable of seed in the Bible. It's very important that sometimes God gives you an idea or a thought, and that thing's got to, a seed goes into the ground. It dies and goes in the ground before it comes back to life and grows into what it's supposed to be.
Right.
So oftentimes anything good has to die first.
Right.
And so I had this idea of what this business was going to look like in the timeline, and it all fell apart. And I had such a sense of peace during it all that I knew, I was like, no, I heard from God, and I took some steps out. I set up an LLC, and I told some people I was interested in moving forward, and it was like the ball was in their court, right? And so it was just kind of wait and see what God does, right? And then COVID hit, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm still here. And I mean, but it kind of died before that too. Some things changed, and but yeah. So I had a meeting. I was going, and I was still a little bit like, I think I'm doing this right thing or whatever.
Right.
And I checked into this hotel, and I walk in, and it was a hotel I've never stayed at before, a chain I've never stayed in or whatever. And there's a TV blaring in the room, and it's the sound of rushing water. And I walk in, and there's running water on this screen, and it's like midnight. I get into the hotel late, and I don't know why this TV's on and blaring, but it was just like, I just had to laugh. I was like, God, that's awesome. Like
that's
like
wild.
You just let me know I'm still I'm still in this.
Right.
So yeah, it's been cool. It's been really cool to see because nothing's been done in my own strength. It's just like there's a mixture of hustle and
Mm-hmm.
trust,
Right.
right? Like you put in the work,
Absolutely.
but you also rest and trust that God is doing the heavy lifting,
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's been really really cool. I mean, it's taken a sort of a lifetime for me to get to this point, and
Right.
I've got a long way to go. I got a lot to learn.
You definitely put the time in.
Yeah,
30 years.
yeah, but I feel really really good because I can't take credit for any of the success that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
I'm not that smart,
Right.
but I've been listening. I've learned to listen
Yeah.
and obey, and I don't have it right. I don't get it right the first time every time, but God's full of grace
Well,
and He's full of mercy.
it's still an example of patience and faithfulness.
Yeah,
So understanding that you had that spoken over you,
yeah,
and that God was in it,
yeah,
but the timing was His also.
yeah,
And so a lot of times, out of impatience, we'll try to force things
right.
because we've heard from the Lord. And you probably have heard from the Lord. I'm not going to discount that and say it's not the Lord. I'm not talking about you specifically,
Yeah,
but for listeners, if timing hasn't worked out, or a business venture, or even relationships or whatever haven't worked out, and you truly are doing the best that you can do to represent Christ in that, it might just be a function of it's not time yet.
yeah,
Don't just question God's voice because it hasn't happened. His timeline's so much different than ours.
yeah,
It's completely different. And our time and our desires aren't irrelevant, but his timing is perfect for all of it to line up.
yeah.
So,
And He's a God of resurrection,
yeah,
right? So when something looks dead to you, don't lose faith
right. Yeah, that's
because it's
awesome.
never too far for Him to bring it back.
I love that. I think
Yeah,
that's a great way to let it ride.
yeah.
So we'll go for a question of the day because we always do.
All right.
And I did not premeditate one. So I'm going to come up with one right off the noggin. What's your favorite place to travel to?
Well, I kind of gave it away a minute ago with the stream.
Yeah.
Like I like to get next to running water, like
Okay.
fresh, clean mountain
Bathtub?
water. No,
Oh,
no,
not the
no,
bathtub
no,
running water.
no. I like a good. I like a good. I grew up. With a stream in my backyard.
Okay.
Pretty nice. I lived. It was a tributary to the Hudson River, so it was a.
Very nice.
But it was like just a. We called it a brook. People have different names.
Yeah.
Down here, you call
It's
it
a crick. A crick.
but yeah, put me in the crick and I'm a happy man. But
Okay.
no, I like going places where I can spend some time. I'm starting to get into kayaking a little bit.
Nice.
I haven't pulled the trigger and bought my own kayaks.
Okay.
I've been borrowing
It's
some
not a
here
bad
and there.
idea.
So I love kayaking, and that's my new thing. But
That's
it's gotta
cool.
be. I like moving water. I don't want to be on a lake. I want to be going down a stream.
Okay. I actually have decided I'm going to buy a tent so that I can try camping with my 18-month-old son.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I think it's going to be difficult. I definitely think it'll take a few tries,
Yeah.
and I'll probably royally screw up his sleep schedule for at least 2 of the tries and be miserable the rest of the night trying to keep up with him. But the reward of it, I think, when he gets to enjoy it and we get to do the father-son trips and everything, because I don't think the first trip is always going to be horrible, in my opinion.
Well,
with him being as young
it
as he
doesn't have
is.
to be, but I would say.
I mean, it's sleep-wise.
On how young he is, you might want to wait till he can actually remember it. Because I don't know if you took him camping right now, if he'd remember that trip.
Well, I'm thinking more like backyard camping, get him
Yeah.
used to sleeping in the tent.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So he's comfortable with it.
Yep.
So when we go somewhere else and we don't have the option to take him back inside to his room, he knows that it's okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then also
Most of the camping I did with my kids was either in the house or in the backyard.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we even did the backyard a whole night, but
I
in the
would
house
probably
we get in a tent.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. They have these little toddler tents that
Yeah.
they don't take poles or anything. They're like the window shades that twist.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is, the spring-loaded kind of thing.
Right.
And it just pops right open, and there's a mattress in it and everything.
Cool.
Thought about getting him one of those. But anyways, thank you once again for being on. It's always a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
And we need to shut this thing down. It's late. All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Tune in again next week.